Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now May 15th of 2023, and if we examine the Skywalker saga, it is absolutely safe to say that one of the fan favorite characters is Luke Skywalker, depending on which trilogy you look at, of course. If you look at the original trilogy, of course, that's where fans favor that iteration of Luke as opposed to the sequels. The iteration of Luke in the Mandoverse is also exceptional. We have a great introduction in Mando Season 2, as well as a return of him in the Book of Boba Fett. And speaking about this in particular, Dave Filoni had a couple of things to say about a specific deleted scene involving Luke Skywalker. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support, and without further ado, let's get right into this. Now, as you all know, Luke Skywalker was used sparingly in both Mando Season 2's finale and the Book of Boba Fett. In fact, I would go as far to say that maybe in the Book of Boba Fett, it wasn't so sparing. You know, when you look at the character, he had a really great story to tell by allowing Grogu to train with him, kind of tapping more into his mind, letting him remember more about the events of Order 66 and stuff around those lines. However, this is where things begin to get really interesting about what Filoni had to say about what could have been when it came to Luke in the Book of Boba Fett specifically, and what they were actually going to plan to do for Mando Season 3 in the early drafts before excluding Luke. Now, beyond all of this, alright, with both Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni recently teasing fans of what is to come next for Star Wars, Dave Filoni recently got on the subject about the big deleted scene that he excluded from the Book of Boba. Filoni went to state the following: "So yeah, we had this scene written out in the script, and we did some test footage and test shots with Graham Hamilton for how Luke was going to be used. We were testing how this could have worked out for Luke to travel back to Tatooine after sending Grogu away on his X-Wing and sensing a disturbance in the Force for what happened in the final episode. We wanted to tell the short tale of Luke heading to Jabba's palace, in search of Boba Fett and the child at the time. We had these ideas of Luke meeting up with Fennec, informing Luke that Boba was away on business. We were going to actually spend part of that finale and that final episode of Luke in search of Grogu, and eventually getting involved briefly, and I mean very briefly, in that final fight and confrontation at the end that Din, Boba, and Grogu were involved in." Now, what's interesting about this, guys, before I actually go on to the next thing that Dave Filoni talks about, is that what's great about this is that I think it would have made more sense because Luke would sense that there was some kind of trouble happening for Grogu. He would have stepped in, defended him, and went on along his merry way. Because you guys gotta remember that he did send his X-Wing there, he knew where Grogu went, and he sent them back to Tatooine. So what's interesting about this, though, is that when you look at everything related to that, we know that the Book of Boba Fett was going to be a very detailed, ending or finale. It was going to have Luke involved in there, meeting up with Fennec, and Fennec telling him that Boba Fett was away, and how he would be in search of Boba and Grogu at the same exact time. So some of this was going to be done in Jabba's palace, or, Boba Fett's palace, and it was going to be a very visually impressive scene. They did some test shots, some test footage, some things are floating around out there as well. Dave Filoni kind of alluded to that, of how they were going to use some of this footage initially for Mando Season 3, but they didn't use that in the long run in the final script of Mando Season 3. But this is where things get interesting, because it does involve Kathleen Kennedy once again, at no surprise, about the whole entire scene featuring Luke. Now, he goes on to elaborate, it just didn't work out that way. We had discussed this with Kathy, and she felt Luke would just steal the show that way, and it was going to strip the focus from Grogu's journey too much. We had an interesting scene where Luke and Grogu were going to be seen together in the same frame, making some kind of exchange through dialogue. But like I said, we did some test shots for Luke with Graham Hamilton for Jabba's palace, and it was a tough one for us because Luke was going to get these action sequences without the hood over his head, and we also struggled on perfecting our techniques that we had thanks to ILM for helping out, but it wouldn't have been perfected anyway, but it could have been. Now, interestingly enough, what Dave Filoni's talking about here is the fact that this deepfake technology, it is a little flawed, at least through ILM and when Lucasfilm was working on Boba Fett, where if you have them moving very fast or going through a very fast motion or fast-paced matter, you do kind of see the imperfections. If you guys go ahead and pause the scenes, or you slow down the frames, where I believe Luke does like a front flip or something like that, or he's like tossing himself or running across the lake there, or the swamp on Ossus, you can see the imperfections in the face if you go frame by frame. And their concern was there was a lot of fast motion sequences and up-close shots of his face, and it was going to be very hard to perfect that. So that's why in scenes like that, John and Dave's plan for future projects are recasting. You know, getting an actual actor in there to do close-up shots strictly, and then when they have faraway shots where it's simple dialogue and stationary shots, they'll then move on to just Luke delivering dialogue and have Graham Hamilton stand in, where they'll use archived footage of Mark Hamill to match his actual face. It's a very interesting technique that ILM created and that they got ideas from a lot of creators around the world. So Dave Filoni goes on to conclude, I know Morrison had a blast talking with Mark about the original trilogy, and they were both a bit let down over the scene not getting past test footage, but it was a scene that we were working on. So again, I think visually it would have been amazing to get that homage back where you have Luke in Jabba's palace searching for, you know, somebody or something and requesting for help or some kind of aid. And I think it would have made a lot of sense, because you would think if Luke really cared about Grogu, he sent them away to Tatooine. And in this deleted scene, when he goes to Tatooine, Luke senses that there's some kind of danger there. Alright? And he goes there, he helps out, and that's that. But it was going to be a very brief scene, probably way shorter than that segment that you got on Ossus where he's training Grogu. It was going to be a very small moment that Dave Filoni goes on to talk about. So what I find interesting about this too is the fact that Boba Fett was going to have a scene with Luke, a very short moment where they exchange dialogue. What was the context of that dialogue? We have no idea. It might have just been something simple, you know, sharing their differences or connecting maybe, or becoming allies, or heck, maybe it was going to be some kind of rivalry. Who knows? You know, we know that Boba Fett had a lot of issues with Luke in Legends. He also had moments where he actually, you know, didn't have much of an issue with Luke at all in earlier segments of Legends that didn't necessarily get past George Lucas's approval. So there was a lot of things in Legends that did not make it into the books and the comics. But I digress. I mean, what's great about this is that this goes to show you that this could be used in future projects or installments, whatever have you. As John, or should I say as Dave stated, that they were thinking about throwing this into Mando Season 3, that just didn't work out as well. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to hear what you guys have to say about the whole Luke, Boba, and Fennec dynamic, and how it does line up with those images that have surfaced recently, involving, you know, Mark, Boba, Tamora, of course, and Fennec Shand in the overall, you know, Book of Boba Fett show. So guys, drop a thumbs up below. Let me know what you guys have to say about all of this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.